Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Ollie Barrett. Good afternoon, Ollie, from New Delhi.
Hello Tanvi, it's 12:30 p.m. here in London, 1:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up in the next half hour, the state opening of the UK Parliament. US Republicans try to put on a show of unity at their convention, and swimming in the River Seine in Paris. First, the headlines.
India calls for urgent reforms of the United Nations Security Council to address global challenges. Says the current, quote, vintage multilateral system has failed. King Charles III delivers the speech at the state opening of Parliament in London, focuses on reviving the economy and tackling housing issues. And at least 6 people are dead following violent clashes over quota in government jobs. Bangladesh shuts universities and colleges indefinitely. India has once again called for the much-needed reforms at the United Nations, starting with the United Nations Security Council. Delivering India's statement at the UNSC open debate on multilateral cooperation in the interest of a more just, democratic and sustainable world order, Chargé d'Affaires Ambassador R. Ravindra said that multipolarity being witnessed in the world is here to stay.
Multipolarity, as we are witnessing it now, is here to stay. The primary reason the multilateral system has failed to deliver is that it is still stuck in a 1945 vintage binary outlook reflected clearly in the composition of this Security Council. The core of India's position on reformed multilateralism, therefore, lies in a call for the reform of the UN Security Council that is reflective of contemporary realities of today. For multilateral cooperation to deliver, it must emanate from a representation of developing countries in all major decision-making bodies, especially in the peace and security architecture. As we convened for the Summit of the Future, let us recommit to time-bound negotiations on UNSC reforms. The multilateral system cannot deliver without the sustained commitment of major powers and groups to global institutions and a rules-based order. And in this context, it is important that all must adhere to the basic building block of international cooperation, which is good faith negotiations. Sabotaging of negotiating processes and mechanisms by big countries or groups in the narrow interest of their own positions is detrimental to the multilateral spirit and must be called out wherever necessary.
Anger over jobs reserved for war heroes' children is heating up the country, Bangladesh. Anti-quota protesters clashed with police and ruling Awami League party-affiliated student wing Bangladesh Chhatra League, leaving at least 6 people dead and several injured. The border guard Bangladesh personnel have been deployed to maintain law and order situation amid an ongoing quota reform movement across the country. All schools and universities will remain closed until further notice. Protests began earlier this month when the High Court ordered the government to reinstate the 30% job quota. A 16-member strong crew of a Comoros-flagged oil tanker that capsized off Oman are still missing. The country's Maritime Security Centre said that on Tuesday, the crew of Prestige Falcon, comprising of 13 Indian nationals and 3 Sri Lankans, went missing. The vessel transmitted a distress call around 2200 hours on July 14th off the coast of Oman. Omani authorities are conducting a search and rescue operation at the scene in coordination with maritime authorities and the Indian Navy. The Indian Embassy in Oman is in constant touch with the Omani authorities. The tanker was heading to the Yemeni port of Aden and capsized off Oman's major industrial port of Duqm on Monday. On to the UK now. In a grand ceremony to mark the opening of the new parliament, King Charles III has outlined the newly appointed government's plans under Prime Minister Keir Starmer. My colleague Ollie Barrett is in London. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. So, Ollie, it was a ceremony full of pomp and pageantry?
Absolutely, it was, Tanvi, the state opening of the UK's Parliament, which, as you say, marks the official start of the new government's legislative agenda, and it began with King Charles III delivering the so-called King's Speech. It's an address written by the government. The King said in it that securing economic growth would be a fundamental mission.
Stability will be the cornerstone of my government's economic policy, and every decision will be consistent with its fiscal rules. It will legislate to ensure that all significant tax and spending changes are subject to an independent assessment by the Office for Budget Responsibility. Bills will be brought forward to strengthen audit and corporate governance alongside pension investment.
Foreign affairs got a mention as well, including the new government's stance on Ukraine.
My government will continue to give its full support to Ukraine and its people, and it will endeavour to play a leading role in providing Ukraine with a clear path to NATO membership. My government will play its part in trying to secure long-term peace and security in the Middle East.
DD India's Stuart Smith, who has been following that speech over the last hour or so. Stuart, any surprises?
There were no surprises in that announcement, which isn't guaranteed. A government midway through its term at a new state opening of Parliament could, for example, drop bills that have been previewed or add detail to new bills which were expected, especially when the government has a small majority. It's not uncommon to see previewed bills watered down or scrapped completely, perhaps due to pushback from lawmakers within the government's party or from the public. But this was straight down the line, exactly as the Labour government had promised in its manifesto when seeking election. A signal from the new Prime Minister Keir Starmer to the country, reportedly about trust, confidence and projecting stability. So no surprises, quite deliberately, from that 130-page manifesto. It was as expected. Planning reform, pay reform, nationalisation of aspects of the UK's transport and energy system. 40 bills in total, which the government has ostensibly 5 years to get through Parliament before a new general election has to be called. As to what happens now, lawmakers will go back to the House of Commons to debate some of the aspects of what was announced. The Prime Minister will have a chance to sell the King's Speech, while King Charles has to read in a neutral, deadpan voice, not his words, but he's the one reading them. It's now Keir Starmer's chance, the new Prime Minister, to sell this to lawmakers, and then the Leader of the Opposition, the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, will have a chance to respond to what the Labour government is promising for the country.
Stuart Smith, thank you. Russia and Ukraine are set to exchange 90 prisoners of war on Wednesday in a deal facilitated by the United Arab Emirates. Last week, Ukrainian media reported that the Parliament's Commissioner for Human Rights, Dmytro Lubinets, had said that the government, with the help of the UAE, was planning a major prisoner exchange soon with Russia. Russia and Ukraine have conducted several exchanges in the 27-month-old conflict that started after Russia launched its so-called special military operation in Ukraine. To the US, where an assassination attempt on the former US President and Republican nominee Donald Trump appears to have united the Republican Party ahead of the presidential election in November. Donald Trump's former rivals for the Republican nomination have been offering full-throated endorsements of his candidacy at the party convention.
It was a grand show of the grand old party as it readies to go full throttle for the November 5 polls, with Donald Trump firmly entrenched in the driver's seat and J.D. Vance as his running mate. Any doubts of division within the ranks was addressed, thoroughly and comprehensively by the speakers, many of whom stood against Trump in the party primaries. Nikki Haley offered a full-throated endorsement of Donald Trump's candidacy. She had described Trump as unelectable and unfit for office during her campaign.
We should acknowledge that there are some Americans who don't agree with Donald Trump 100% of the time. I happen to know some of them. You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. Take it from me, I haven't always agreed with President Trump.
The conservative Florida Governor DeSantis, whose campaign sputtered early in the year, attacked Biden as too old for the job.
Biden is just a figurehead. He's a tool for imposing a leftist agenda on the American people. They support open borders, allowing millions and millions of illegal aliens to pour into our country and to burden our communities, but just don't send any to Martha's Vineyard, then they get really upset.
Trump has pledged to launch the largest deportation effort in US history. Former GOP presidential contender Vivek Ramaswamy took the stage and delivered an impassioned speech backing Donald Trump.
That the media doesn't want you to hear from the Republican Party. Our message to black Americans is this: the media has tried to convince you for decades that Republicans don't care about your communities, but we do. We want for you what we want for every American: safe neighborhoods, clean streets, good jobs, a better life for your children, and a justice system that treats everyone equally, regardless of your skin color and regardless of your political beliefs.
In the wake of the shooting, however, voters' fear about the deeply polarized nation ahead of November 5 election seem only to have deepened. Authorities have yet to identify a motive for the shooting. The show of harmony at the Republican National Convention was intended to contrast with Democrats, who have spent weeks mired in intra-party tensions over whether Biden should abandon his re-election bid after his halting June 27 debate performance against Trump. Vidarthi Rana, Siddharth for DD India.
Well, US media has been reporting that the United States received intelligence about an Iranian plot to try and assassinate former President Donald Trump. US officials say the Secret Service shared details of an increased threat with the Trump campaign. The White House has declined to comment, but officials say there are no connections known between this claimed plot and the weekend assassination attempt by 20-year-old shooter Thomas Matthew Crooks. And they say there are no signs that he had any foreign or domestic accomplices. Following the threat alerts, the security around the former president has been increased. Meanwhile, Iran's mission to the United Nations in New York says the claims are unsubstantiated and malicious. Tesla CEO Elon Musk says he's moving the headquarters of SpaceX and the social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, to Texas, citing criticisms he has of California and of doing business in San Francisco. Pointing to a new state law that would ban teachers from telling families about student gender identity changes, Musk tweeted that he's moving the headquarters of SpaceX from Hawthorne to the company's launch test site in Texas. The move would be a blow to Southern California, where SpaceX has helped to anchor a burgeoning space economy. Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo has taken a dip in the River Seine earlier today in an attempt to demonstrate her confidence in the water quality ahead of Olympic events set to take place in the iconic river. Accompanied by Paris 2024 President Tony Escanguet and Paris Region Prefect Marc Guillaume, Hidalgo's swim near the Pont Marie Bridge followed Sports Minister Amélie Oudéa-Castéra's similar gesture last Saturday. The Seine is scheduled to host the triathlon and marathon swimming events for the Olympics, which will be held from July the 26th to August the 11th. Looks quite cold in there, Tanvi. Back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ollie. Ollie Barrett joining us from London. More from Europe. Europe's second top court on Wednesday said that the European Commission did not give the public sufficient access to the purchase agreements for COVID-19 vaccines during the pandemic, upholding a challenge brought by the EU lawmakers against the EU executive's handling of the deals. The EU executive signed a number of large contracts to secure vaccines from severe pharmaceutical companies at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 and 21. European Parliament lawmakers wanted to examine the contracts to understand the terms and conditions, but were only given partial access, while some documents were redacted, and the Commission said that this was done to protect commercial interests and the decision-making process of the body. The lawmakers subsequently took their grievances to the Luxembourg-based General Court, which said that the Commission had not demonstrated that access to certain clauses would have undermined the commercial interest of the companies involved. EU Parliament President Roberta Metsola said that the Parliament's organising body will again discuss how the institution will engage with Hungary while it holds the EU's rotating presidency. This follows criticism of Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban on his recent visits to Russia and China on a self-styled peace mission to end the conflict in Ukraine.
Showed with a strong parliament we can do great things. You can only succeed in this parliament if you build bridges, if you create alliances. And that is what I sought to do as from the very first day. I was elected 2.5 years ago, and it is one that I have pledged to do during this latest campaign for me to be re-elected. It is one where I think we can create the best majorities, which is a pro-European platform for the future.
And we are now joined by DW's Thomas Sparrow. He joins us from Berlin for more. Hi, Thomas. Roberta Metsola has been re-elected as European Parliament President and is only the second president after Germany's Martin Schulz to have won another term. How challenging is the second term going to be?
It is going to be very challenging if you judge by what experts are saying in the European Union, not only because there are specific problems or issues that are of internal nature in the Parliament. The fact that in recent European Parliament elections there was a marked surge by far-right parties, by far-right politicians, or at least by voting of those far-right politicians. So that's one internal challenge that certainly Metsola will be facing as she leads the Parliament in the next 2.5 years. But there are also external challenges that she will continue to face. First and foremost, obviously, how to deal with the war in Ukraine. And it's important here to stress that the European Parliament is the direct link between European citizens on the one hand and European institutions on the other hand, and it's directly elected by European citizens. So the European Parliament as such plays a very significant role when it comes to understanding how Europe works and also how Europe performs on the international arena. So the role that Roberta Metsola will definitely have as she starts her new period in front of the European Parliament will be one marked by challenges both of internal nature and also of external nature as well.
Now, German former Defence Minister Ursula von der Leyen is eyeing a second term as President of the European Commission. Will her confirmation be quite as smooth?
It won't be quite as smooth compared to Roberta Metzola's confirmation, but it is one that also plays a very important role and is extremely significant for the European Union's priorities. Ursula von der Leyen has been one of the most visible politicians at an EU level in the last few years, if not the most visible politician. And if she does secure that majority needed to be re-elected as head of the European Commission, she will then face obviously significant challenges when it comes to dealing with European governments that do not necessarily see eye to eye. For example, when it comes to how to deal with Ukraine. You already mentioned in your introduction the fact that Viktor Orban in Hungary sees support to Ukraine in a rather different light compared to other European governments. So Ursula von der Leyen, if re-elected, will certainly play a very important role when it comes to bringing those different opinions to the table and making sure that there are compromises. Now, Ursula von der Leyen is presenting herself as an experienced politician that can precisely bridge those different gaps. That is an experienced politician that is needed specifically at a time when the EU in general and the European Commission in particular are facing significant internal and external challenges. It'll still be a very important question to see whether that experience, whether those challenges will be enough for Ursula von der Leyen to be re-elected as head of the European Commission.
So it will be a tight vote therefore, Len. Thank you, Thomas Sparrow, joining us from DW headquarters in Berlin. Still to come on DD India Global. Taiwan is willing to take more responsibility for defending itself, says its premier, after Donald Trump told a US daily that Taiwan does not give US anything in return for protecting them. And after IMF's latest World Economic Outlook, Asian Development Bank also maintains India's GDP growth forecast at 7% for the current financial year.
While there's still enough food for everyone on the planet, food shortages are a real problem. Let's take a look at the factors causing this and what can be done to save our food.
What we host now, it's called Farm School. One of the goals is to teach them agriculture so that 50 years from now, when there's so much change in climate, they don't have to deal with learning two new skills.
We empower women who are really poor and who don't have too much economic empowerment to eat better.
We adopt this strategy in our product. The volatile compounds induce the defence mechanism and help to prolong shelf life by 2 more days. So it's purely natural.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Back to Asia. The Philippines and China have agreed to set up new lines of communication to improve their handling of maritime disputes as ties soar over clashes about territory in the South China Sea. According to a document and a Philippine diplomatic source, 3 communication channels would be established specifically for maritime issues, with highlights of an arrangement on improving Philippines-China maritime communication mechanisms. This was signed during regular talks between the two sides on July the 2nd. The two countries have traded barbs repeatedly over jurisdiction in the contested South China Sea, as the Philippines, emboldened by support of defense ally the US, challenges China's permanent presence around strategic features inside Manila's exclusive economic zone. Taiwan's ruling party said on Wednesday that the former US President Donald Trump's comments were nothing more than hoping that Taiwan would show the same determination to protect its security as Japan, South Korea and the European Union. It further added that China is the biggest threat to the United States. This is the consensus of the Democratic and Republican parties. Party's Secretary General Lin Yu Yang said that now is the best era of Taiwan-US relations. This statement comes after former US President Donald Trump said that Taiwan should pay the United States for its defense as it does not give the country anything in return.
We
will work hard to maintain the friendly relationship of both sides, Taiwan and United States, and continue to bring it forward. We are willing to take on more responsibility. We are defending ourselves and ensuring our security.
Now, the Asian Development Bank on Wednesday maintained India's GDP growth forecast at 7% for the current financial year, citing that a rebound in agriculture is expected given the above-normal monsoon projections. ADB's July outlook said that India's agriculture sector, which is expected to rebound with forecasts for an above-normal monsoon, will be important to sustain the economic growth in rural areas. It said that investment demand led by public investment remained strong. The Delhi Metro Rail Corporation, DMRC, has introduced the international flights check-in facilities at New Delhi and Shivaji Stadium metro stations on the Airport Express line. This initiative aims to enhance passenger convenience and streamline travel procedures for international flights departing from the IGI, that's Indira Gandhi International Airport in New Delhi. Previously available only for domestic travellers, the check-in and baggage drop service now accommodates international passengers flying with Air India and Vistara Airlines. The DMRC has also invited more airlines to set up this facility to further benefit the passengers. And next we take a look at other stories making news around the world. Thailand's police on Wednesday said that cyanide poisoning is likely the cause of the death of 6 foreigners who were found inside a luxury hotel room in central Bangkok. One of the dead is suspected to be the killer. Greece's iconic Acropolis was temporarily closed on Wednesday as the country sizzled in another heat wave. Authorities have shut down the popular site during peak heat hours. Devotees in Bahrain's capital Manama celebrated Ashura, a festival to honor the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad. As part of the tradition, worshippers bang their chests and chant while flogging themselves with knives or swords in mourning for Imam Hussein. It is the season when fishermen in Phu Yen province of Vietnam eagerly prepare their gear for offshore trips to catch anchovies, commonly used to make dried food and traditional fish sauce. Take a look how they do that. With that, we wrap up this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles. And for those on the go, you can catch all the latest news and updates on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. So we will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from entire team here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.